Morena koutou, I o te rānei, to ngā kaunihira, kai kaunihira, me ngā kaimahi, tēnā rā koutou. So, greetings, welcome to this meeting of Environmental Sciences and Policy Committee, formal meeting. So I'll just open up in the usual way. Tuia ki roto, tuia ki raro, tuia ki waho, tuia te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, tuia whaumie rāra ki e. So we have an apology from Councillor Laws, and I understand that Councillor Kelleher may be joining online. Oh, he's online.
Here, thank you, Chair.
So Councillor Kelleher.
Apologies from Councillor Malcolm, Mr. Chair.
Right, an apology from Councillor Malcolm. We just note those. Didn't we? Public forum, no requests to speak have been received. So confirmation of the agenda, which is laid out in the papers. I'll so move, seconded by Elliot. No discussion, will put in motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. And just a reminder of declaration of interest, should there be any relating to this subject matter of the meeting today. Then at the time of printing, there were no requests for presentations. I think we've just got the business that's in there today. Then before we go to that, of course, we get the minutes of our last meeting, Thursday the 27th of June. I'd ask that someone, if we could have a mover to receive those minutes, true and accurate record. That's from Councillor Ware, seconded by Councillor McCall. Any discussion on any corrections, alterations? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. And I just note that it's been live streamed also, this meeting. Now, matters for consideration. I think open actions for resolutions of the committee will come after the discussion of the paper. Take it. So if we go to the matters for consideration, regional conservation status of birds in Otago, and we have Scott here to talk to us, and Ben Orua. Welcome and thank you for a very comprehensive paper, worked in conjunction with Doc and others, I believe. So I'll hand it over to you. Go.
Ngā mihi, Edward. Kia ora. You'll know me by now, presenting these types of conservation state. And today I have the great delight to present on the regional conservation status of birds in Otago. So like Edward mentioned, this was in conjunction with experts from the Department of Conservation up by the University of Otago and the regional representative from Birds and Dead. Thanks, Brian. Must be up. So, as has been mentioned before, threat classifications play an important role in monitoring biodiversity and informing conservation action. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Department of Conservation, RFI, is tasked with managing Indigenous species under the Wildlife Act. But regional and district councils have statutory obligations to maintain biodiversity under the Resource Management Act, as we discussed yesterday in the biodiversity strategy meeting. The New Zealand threat classification system is a national system to assess the conservation status of species found in the wild in Aotearoa. It is a robust tool that uses objective criteria and information drawn from a wide range of experts to rigorously assess the risk of extinction faced by Indigenous plants, animals, and, as of 2022, fungi. Each taxon is placed in a category that reflects the level of risk it faces. The system is specifically designed to be relevant to New Zealand's unusual ecological and geographic conditions. The New Zealand threat classification is administered by the Department of Conservation on behalf of New Zealanders and complements, not competes, with the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List System, or the IUN Red List System. Both the New Zealand Threat Classification System and the IUCN Red List System use this rule-based approaches to assess the risk of extinction based on estimates of population sizes and trends. For local government, having a good understanding of regional population sizes and knowledge of where declines are occurring is key to managing the habitat of threatened species and supporting their recovery. Such knowledge is particularly important for informing assessment of environmental effects conducted through consenting processes. The information can also feed into the prioritisation of conservation activities undertaken by regional and district councils, such as monitoring, pest animal and plant control and restoration programs. While the IUCN Red List system is effective internationally and the New Zealand Threat Classification system is effective at the national level, they can overlook situations where taxa are under greater pressure locally. To address these needs, local government has developed a threat classification system with the Department of Conservation. This system leverages off the national assessments in the New Zealand Threat Classification system, providing information relevant for the regional context. Like the New Zealand Threat Classification system is complementary to the IUCN one, the regional classification system will be complementary to both. It has been developed to provide a regional perspective that is more sensitive to the state of species with naturally restricted distributions and small numbers as a result of their insular rarity. OSC has completed 5 regional threat assessments. The first 4 in order of the publications in this series were reptiles, bats, indigenous vascular plants, and amphibians. They have all been presented to this committee. I'll now talk about the latest regional conservation status in Otago, this time for birds. So a total of 283 bird species were assessed. This large number makes Otago a diverse region for birds in Aotearoa, containing a high proportion of birds identified in the national system. For example, in the New Zealand Threat Classification system, 495 species are mentioned. As you might recall, the regional system has for resident native species 3 broad conservation status categories: threatened, at risk, or not threatened. Threatened species are those whose populations are in decline and face imminent extinction if current trends are not arrested. Threatened species can have stable populations, are highly susceptible to stochastic, unpredictable events that could lead to extinction. So those are those with small populations. The threatened category comprises 4 conservation status that reflect the severity of risk: nationally critical or regionally critical, the most severe level of threat, followed by regionally endangered, regionally vulnerable, and as of 2021, regionally increasing. At-risk species are those buffered by extinction by the size and state of their population, but are likely to become threatened should pressures on their populations worsen. There are 4 at-risk conservation statuses: declining, recovering, relict, and naturally uncommon. As of June, it's down to 3 statuses. Species that meet none of these criteria are at risk or threatened. That criteria to be at risk or threatened are not threatened. In our bird assessment, 32 species are in the category regionally threatened, with 9 in the status regionally critical, at most severe level, 6 in regionally endangered, and 17 in regionally vulnerable. Some of those in the regionally critical were due to their small population size, such as Tauranga, the northern royal albatross, whose colony at Tauranga Head, Pukekura, is the only albatross colony found on human-inhabited mainland in the southern hemisphere. The first chick fledged at Pukiro Colony in September 1938. As of October 2023, there are 242 mature individuals based on this cited band combinations from those previous 2 years. It qualifies as regionally critical because there's still under 250 mature individuals. That's one of the criteria for regionally critical. Other species were due to their decline, such as for yellow-eye penguins or huiho. Between 2008 and 2023, the population declined by 78% in Otago. The region would have been a national stronghold of the population until recently. There are now only 129 breeding pairs remaining as of 2023. In the regionally at-risk category, there were 4 species. There were 3 declining, one was recovering. The red-billed gull, red-billed gull, which bucked the trend for nationally, whereas at-risk declining. Translocations to reintroduce or introduce species to the region have also happened for conservation purposes. 3 of them are in progress, with 2 of them being reintroductions, the buff weka in South Island Takahe, and one of them being an assisted migration, the Haas tokaweka, which is where a species is translocated from outside the region for conservation benefit. And that's only found at one location at Oregon or US entry. Our panel also assessed 135 regionally non-resident native species. The majority of these were regionally vagrants, as 95, which are species observed in the region less than 5 times a year and not breeding. Then regionally migrants at 36, which are species observed in the region greater than 50 times a year and not breeding. There are also 2 regional colonisers, which have those species that have settled in the region but would have numbers that would trigger a regionally threatened status. They've only arrived since and have been recording breeding since 1950. The number of regionally data deficient species was 10. This is because our expert panel felt there was insufficient data to assign a threat status. As mentioned yesterday, these taxons can be threatened or in some instances could be extinct in Otago, such as for the grey duck, but are not definitely known to belong to any particular category due to a lack of current knowledge about their distribution and abundance. A further 25 species are introduced and naturalised, and 10 are introduced, not established, where a release is documented, but with no record of a self-sustaining population in the wild, or a deliberate introduction is documented, and published records indicate the species bred or probably bred, but it's no longer extant. It's no longer having a current population there. Additionally, 43 species were identified as regionally extinct. And that compares to the 62 species of bird nationally that went extinct. The assessment highlights 1 species endemic to Otago, the Otago shad, matapo. This species currently only breeds in the region but can be seen outside of Otago. Our assessment also identified Otago as a nationally stronghold for 8 bird species, meaning more than 20% of the national population that's here in the region. They include migratory shorebirds and domestic migrants, emphasising the region's critical role in preserving these species. One of these bird species is endemic to Otago. This is the aptly named Otago shad. And we also applied other qualifiers as shown in the report. They could be assessment qualifiers like data poor, biological qualifiers like range restricted, or population state qualifiers like one location, climate impact, and extreme fluctuations. And such information will be able to feed into other work programs at the OSC, like the climate change strategy, such as when looking at those species that are impacted by climate. Any questions?
Go to Councillor Meekin.
Could I just record a conflict of interest as trustee of the Yellow Penguin Trust first? And look, this is really good. All the stuff is great to understand the risk of these species, but for what purpose? Because as trustee of the Yellow Penguin Trust, I spend a lot of time trying to find funding to keep that operation going. Next year we'll be showing a deficit of, I think, $90,000, and that's doing things at a minimum. So what is the purpose of this report? Is it supposed to feed into some sort of funding arrangement, or because if it doesn't, if we don't support organisations that are involved in preventing the extinction, what is the point of it?
I think that the short answer, Tim, is that it absolutely should feed into not just this table, but all of the other agencies involved in biodiversity, biosecurity, to the decision making, whether it be funding or direct delivery of work programs. What we've talked about a lot around the table in a number of areas is a lack of information to drive good decision making, and the work that Scott's been presenting over time is starting to build that picture that should enable you to have those have that data to better inform your decisions, because we will never be able to fund everything. And in order to start talking about how you might make those trade-offs or direct staff to work with other agencies or whatever that might be, then you need this sort of information, because in the absence of it, it becomes very difficult. So it's a big work program, and I think it's would have been 2 or 3 years in.
Correct.
Yeah, correct, and still some more to go, but we're starting to see the output of that work, which will enable, when reports come forward in the future, much better information to inform your decisions.
Okay, so just in terms of the environmental fund and the applications for that, now the yellow penguin has been endangered for years, and you've seen the decline. You've got those figures there. This is why I had to decline. I had to say that I have a conflict. The trust actually put an application into the environmental fund last year, which was turned down because the trust was unable to prove that we were contributing at least 50% of the cost. It was a complete wrong interpretation of that application from the ORC's point of view, and there was no way we could come back and have any kind of.
I would caution us against litigating an individual application to the Eco Fund.
Okay,
My message there would
Yeah.
be if there were concerns about the way an application was interpreted,
No.
then
Can I withdraw
there
that? Can I withdraw that?
Yeah.
I'd like to withdraw that. It's the process that I'm interested in. Okay, we've got this information coming through at one end. Does it filter all the way through, cascade through the organisation, so that the ORC is then targeting organisations that are actually supporting or need support?
Biodiversity strategy.
So yes, it does. The framework for the Eco Fund, and Alan can jump in here as well because he knows it better than probably better than me even. I think is that that is the appropriate place to set the criteria by which the panel that is assessing considers applications and then distributes the funding, which we always know is always oversubscribed in terms of applications. So yes, this will help inform and part of the review of the Eco Fund and the criteria or the development of the future fund, whatever that ends up being called, is for this table to set the types of criteria that you would like to be considered when we're making those funding decisions. So all of this will build that picture, and then obviously that the workshop yesterday, and for those who might watch this online, that workshop will be public, and it was to discuss the biodiversity strategy or the biodiversity biosecurity strategy. This information will obviously form a big part of that in terms of what is it that we should be focusing on, not just ourselves, like say the collective us around all of the agencies involved in biodiversity and biosecurity, including the community and iwi. That will really be built of a foundation of this data where we understand what our risks are in Otago.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Councillor Scott.
I would just like to start by supporting what Councillor Methven had actually said, and I remember when the funding was withdrawn from the Yellow-eyed Penguin Trust was on uncertain grounds, and so I welcome the data on bird life, so that it can become an integrated discussion. My question is in relation to yesterday we talked about biodiversity strategy and so forth. one of the key things that's happened in our biodiversity as a council is mapping. And I think that has been brought to some type of conclusion. Now, in relation to birds, we heard Councillor Forbes talk about wildlife corridors and such like, because what I'd like to see from this data that you've got is actions. And I'd like to think that, you know, not necessarily for the yellow-eyed penguin, it was the coastal bird, but nevertheless it has its wildlife habitat. But, yeah, I'm getting there. What are the action points? And I'd like to, you know, as an example, maybe if you could talk about the bush corridors and the mapping and how we're using that information to support the bird life and the bird numbers so we can be more ambitious in our targets for birds. Because that was a key part of our biodiversity strategy. Thank you. That's my question.
Can I frame that, Scott? And it would be great if you can, with your expertise then. So the question in terms of the science data is when we move through the biodiversity strategy and start thinking about the action plan that will come off the back of that, how would the scientific data that you are generating through these reports drive the discussion and identification of actions that would then appear in that report, given that, you know, it's not your responsibility as such to generate and improve actions. That's it'll be a team of people, but obviously the information you're preparing will go a long way to informing what those actions are. So maybe just talk through how this would be used and what sort of actions might come off the back of it. Is that all right?
Yeah, with some reference to mapping too, though, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott, and thank you, Richard. So as Richard mentioned, this information is to provide the evidence base to inform your decisions. So we'll take guidance from yourselves. Before we compiled this document, we didn't know what bird species we had in the region.
Yeah.
So that's a fundamental knowledge gap that we filled. Now we have that, we can start to work around what species are mobile, and we can link that with some other work programs around highly mobile fauna. So when it comes to mapping, that's how we can get to the corridors, because we can link in the remnant habitats, the dispersal capabilities of the different species, and then we can link it that way. But we need that direction.
Sorry, we need that. What does that mean? I need that.
So I think that the one of the I mean, what we're hearing is that mapping of data in terms of generating these spatial views of the data we're seeing in these reports will be very helpful. And so I would assume that one of the actions that will appear in there will relate to mapping of data and production of publicly available maps.
Yeah, but
Is that
yeah, okay. So we've got bird data that can be mapped. We've got bush data and habitat data that has been mapped because we've been talking about it for years. You know, how can we bring that together to establish optimum corridors for bird life, to assist bird life? And to be honest, I'm frustrated that that hasn't already happened, because we kept going on about these bush mapping for years. And
is that the wildlands report? I think it might. Yeah. Yeah, look, I don't know. I think I'm hearing, how do we pull these things together so we don't just end up with a series of individual maps that tell us something? Where's the coordination of this material to inform actions that are going to make a difference?
I would like to say an outcome being that we've looked at all the bird data, we've got that, we've looked at all the native bush mapping that we actually have in our systems, and that we've come up with recommendations of future corridors, bush corridors. And it might be a simple thing, like Alexa talked yesterday about how her place, the bush was established beside Lake Whakatipu, her place with a corridor to another bush place. So, you know, the outcome, if this is a critical factor, I'm assuming this is a critical factor in terms of habitat. Maybe there's more critical factors, but you might say, well, actually, there needs to be more native bush in these areas to assist these birds. And so we need a strategy. We maybe purchase the land, we promote the native bush planting, whatever it is. If that's critical, there'll be other critical strategies that, as Kate, I think, said, translate to action. Thank you.
So the question is that happening? And the answer is yes.
Is it happening?
Yes, well, this is the start of that. We've identified the bird species. You see, we've got the mappings. Under the NPSCB, we have to map corridors.
Yeah.
But we need to know the species. We need to know we will now have to work out the dispersal capabilities of those species. And then we can run the types of analyses to do it.
Okay, so my final question to help Councillor Moon is, when will this council get a report that basically says we need native bush, new native bush or better native bush in the following areas of Otago? When will this council receive that? And council will then budget and work with?
I don't know, Brian. I'll have to come back because we need the biodiversity strategy first, which is the commitment that this council has made.
Yeah.
Out of that will come some actions, and one of those actions that might be driven by this table is the action you've just highlighted.
Yeah.
And then staff will have to put some resourcing and timeframes around the development of that. So the first step is the strategy. What we do know is there's a whole lot of data already being collected that will be ready to go once the actions are decided. So it's not a case of write the strategy, then start the data collection and then develop the actions. All of that is sitting there. We will just need to bring to this table the options available around all of the things we could do and how quickly we could do them, and then get some investment decisions around that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Noon, then some for.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the report. So we've got an understanding of the risk assessment for bird life in Otago. My questions around, there are factors like climate change, biosecurity, and will we receive information where we can, excuse the frame, get the best bang for our bucks? And I think Tim's alluded to the yellow-eyed penguins, for example. But ultimately, will we get more data around, look, if we invest in these risk species, we've got a good chance of improving the situation. These other species, they don't translocate well, or they don't do this or don't do that. Ultimately, will we have maybe some of that sort of information coming to the table?
With the information that's been compiled in this report, that's the evidence base that you could use to feed into those sort of processes. So yes, it could happen.
Next step.
We just need that, like Richard mentioned, to go into the biodiversity strategy and get the direction of whether that's the priority from yourselves. Yeah,
Thank you.
but it can happen.
Thank you.
Thanks. Look, Richard and Scott have just answered this, but I'll ask it anyway. I was going to say, is it therefore very opportune that this information and the other information on the other text has come at this moment when we are actively working on that biodiversity strategy? Could be a short answer.
Yes, it is.
That's good. Thanks.
And not only these are regional conservation statuses, but we do have a list of compiled for many other taxonomic groups that could feed into that sort of process. For instance, fungi, peripatus, liverworts, hornworts, mosses, freshwater fishes. That's all going to become available very shortly, and been working with our communications team on a way to get it up on our website page, so we can provide it all back to the community and to yourselves.
Okay.
further. Councillor Elliott, then Mifflin.
Also happy to move on with other questions.
Right.
But I did just have a couple of questions, mostly around the like national strongholds classifier. I was curious if with the Australian little penguin, obviously it's in Australia and Otago. Is there any way that that would be considered a regionally endemic as it relates to the country, because it's the only place in the country where we've got them, or does that only apply if it's also not somewhere else?
Well, endemic would be when it's only found in the region.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can have endemism at different levels. So you can have endemic to Aotearoa. You could have endemic to the region. You can have endemic, like with the Crispidia argentea that you saw at Mahikikatia Pisa Flat, to that one location. So endemism is scalable, but in terms of the Australian little penguin, it was a national stronghold, so meaning that it's got more than 20% of the population. The reason, and it would be considerably more than that, it does breed outside the region in Aotearoa. So not only in Otago.
Okay.
Really cool one. Look at the work from Stephanie Godfrey, her papers and proceedings of the Royal Society B. Fascinating. With that colonisation of the Australian little penguins. Yeah, really nice work.
And then I was curious, is it around the like, because obviously some of them are subspecies and some of them are species. When you're analysing whether it's a national stronghold, do you take the lowest taxa possible?
Correct. So we're leveraging off the New Zealand threat classification system. So we don't want to undermine that national system. So we just use the taxa that are in that document. That's why it differs, say, from the checklist of birds, which is getting updated this month or next, or the IUCN. So there's multiple taxonomies. We use the New Zealand threat classification system to be complementary and not undermine.
Two more, if that's okay, Chris. And then around the I've lost my train of thought, but I was wondering about if there's any way to capture the genetic importance of a specific population, because obviously if it's more than 20% of the national population, it's a national stronghold. But I know that and the moho is already captured in there, but I know that the moho around here are quite genetically distinct from some of the other ones, and so it sort of adds an extra level of importance. And same with our Northern Royal albatross, that might not be more than 20% of the population, but it would be quite an important genetic pool compared to the subantarctic populations or stuff like that. Is there any way in the future of capturing that sort of genetic importance of a local population at all?
Again, these documents are the evidence base to inform that decision. We can capture that sort of information and it should be in there. Like you say, Mahua, Otago is a stronghold. They have genetically, well, they treat it as a evolutionary significant unit, or it was being treated by DOC as that. It's got important genetic diversity that's not represented elsewhere, and it's got a larger population than many other places where it did. So it should be able to be handled the perturbations, so statistics events better than some other locations. If I were to prioritise, that would be an important consideration. Yes.
Cool.
Other examples from other taxonomic groups would be like the long-tailed bats.
Yeah, cool. And then lastly, I'm really happy with all the considerations and how those have been filled out in the thing. Just on the comms considerations, that point 31, does that mean we'll be getting those cool fact sheets we got for the non-avian reptiles? Is that what we'll be seeing for these species and the other classifications we've got and stuff?
Correct. So, well, for some of them. We will be doing fact sheets for the threatened, at risk, regional colonisers, the regional migrants, so about 79 taxa in total. They have been written up. We're waiting for them to go into production with Te Hura Otago Museum with a partnership that Richard and Tom have facilitated. And as you saw with the reptile fact sheets, they're a great resource and they're already on our website and have been used in our social media and have been received very positively. For the other groups, we're working on fact sheets for the bats, trying to get my head around how we would start with the indigenous vascular plants with 1,242 species. That would be a bit overwhelming for anyone. So need to get a head around how to get the information out about what the best way about that. But I have been engaging our Enviro schools, so communication teams and environmental implementation, how they can support it. One consideration that I have had recently, and this will probably be a surprise to Glenn, so is that one of our very talented scientists has started using 3D printing, and you may have seen how they've done it for the landscapes of Otago. And I would have an idea that you could also 3D print some of our taxa. And we did a trial with Tuatara after getting support from Kaitiaki, because I happened to 3D scan multiple Tuatara during my PhD, and they look awesome. So it's deciding which species would be best to complement our and used to raise awareness in the profile of these taonga or taonga species. So yeah, that's something that should be coming.
We have Councillor Methven and Scott.
I'm just thinking about the delivery of our strategy around all of this, Richard. And yesterday we had a report from the Otago Catchment Group and DOC up until recently have had a community partnership funding because they know they can't do it themselves. They want to involve community and they fund community organisations to do that. So what have we got developed at the moment to support the protection of these threatened species? Anything working at the moment, or are we having to develop something new? Is there a new strategy we have to develop and a new model we have to develop in order to involve organisations, or are we going to do it ourselves? What's the plan?
So we've got a biodiversity strategy, but we're proposing a new one. So that was the workshop yesterday. There are, and has been now for a number of years, the Eco Fund, appreciating that hasn't been able to fund everybody, but the idea that was to support community initiatives in the biodiversity, freshwater, environmental space. The idea, I think, and I guess from a staff point of view, is that we have heard that there is a desire for us to do more. We know from talking to the Department of Conservation that there is no longer the same level of funding available, and we know that off the back of Jobs for Nature and Essential Freshwater coming to an end as well. So if we are going to continue to make progress, we're going to have to be smarter with every dollar we spend, and working with community groups and mana whenua who are strongly established through Jobs for Nature and Essential Freshwater. So the strategy and the subsequent actions should be used to enable this council to decide how we better partner to get the outcomes. And of the funding that is available, and there are different pots around, some will be ours, some will be department will, they still have an investment in biodiversity, biosecurity. But if we pull all that together and ensure that investment is best bang for buck, coming back to Andrew's comment, if we're going to invest it, we're confident that it will get the results that we're after. So it's leading towards an action plan that is coordinated with all of the other parties involved in biodiversity, biosecurity, be they agencies or community, and those actions being coordinated in a way that get the best outcome.
So is there any kind of time frame around this? When-
So that was Brian's question before. So the strat, and I have to go back and just
Okay,
check
yeah.
exactly. Amanda will be able to tell me the strategy piece.
Yes, so we're aiming to have a draft strategy ready for June next year, but part of the discussion yesterday was also setting up a councillor reference group, so there'll be and discussions. It's not like you're not going to hear anything until then. There'll be lots of discussions over the next 9 months as that work to develop that content is created.
And there's a few things happening. So we've got that strategy, we've got setting up of the new environmental fund, which needs to happen before 1st of July next year. We've got a review coming this year of the current eco fund and the criteria that are set within that. And then the actions that fall out of the biodiversity, biosecurity strategy would need to be committed to either as part of existing work programs or in future annual or long-term plans. So those conversations will start from the middle of next year.
Thank you.
Councillor Scott, have you still got a question?
Yes.
After you, we'll have Karen Coots in there.
I think just put a thumb up rather than a question.
Oh,
It
sorry.
was like what Richard was saying.
Okay. Councillor Forbes following.
Mike, thank you. My question is about coastal plan or lack of. A lot of the birds must either be based on the coast or pass by the coast or eat fish from the coast. And a coastal plan has responsibility out to, is it 20 nautical miles? We talked previously about the yellow-eyed penguin, so the on-land habitat, the sea habitat, all those dynamics. And here we are talking about bird life and our responsibility. So my question is, where does the coastal plan fit in all this? And how much of a handbrake is it? Is it inhibiting us in our responsibilities?
So we have a coast plan. Tom might be able to jump in here at some point. We have a coast well out of date. Make a public statement to confirm that, what we all know. We being collective council, had as part of the long-term plan conversation, the land and water, the air and the coast plan. A decision was made to prioritise the air plan as the next plan, and then very quickly after that, the coast plan. So I can't answer your question directly, Brian, in terms of the coast plan as it stands now. How much of an impediment is it to some of the progress we'd like to make in biodiversity? I'm not sure. Potentially, Tom or even Edward may have some views on that, but that's where we're at in terms of the development of the new one. But I'll hand over to Tom and see if he's got anything else to add.
Yeah, so really briefly, I think the coastal plan is outdated. We've heard that it's not necessarily a great impediment, but it is a permissive coastal plan. And it's also a coastal plan that hasn't had a huge level of review over time. But we have started working through a process to collect information to review that plan properly. So talking about assessments of habitat and the ecological health of vast areas of our marine environment. That work alongside this type of work will help to inform a review of the plan. The other part I'd suggest is Councillor Somerville before referred to it being an opportune time. I think it is an opportune time to have this type of work come to fruition in terms of making biodiversity gains, but it's also by design. As council chose to invest in broadening its monitoring programs to support exactly this type of investment and exactly this type of prioritisation. This paper's a part of that. Some of the papers you'll see later in the year on that coastal marine environment and of those assessments and the work we're doing in that space also speaks to exactly that. So we're just at this stage broadening our knowledge to support targeted investment and clever approaches to both reg and non-reg actions in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I actually don't have a question. I think I'd better wait until we've actually put the motion, and at that point I'll be happy to help.
Sure. Councillor Wilson.
Kia ora. Thank you, Scott. It's always interesting reading it. And sorry, I just flicked on to Tom Dyer's. I think it's your press release that's gone out today. Came in my emails while we were talking here. And I just want to check something because of a conversation we had yesterday. This is a baseline of where we are now. It doesn't show a trend of things getting better or worse, or does it? Because I would have thought Orokonui has quite a substantial effect, potentially beneficial on what may be happening in Otago, but I could be wrong, especially around this area, around Dunedin. It is just a baseline, is it a report or not?
I might not quite understand your question. This is a conservation status assessment that does work on population status and trends, and it can be projected for 3 generations or 10 years, whatever is longer. But it's a snapshot of what we see today and what is expected over those trends. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Projections.
I picked something up wrong then, and just understanding how you do this, because I thought it was more baseline of what there is there now and you can see. And the trend information comes from the reports of things that have been there in the past.
Correct, that feeds into it, yep, into the expert panel decision-making process, yep.
Yeah. And the future predictions they don't take into account other actions then that may be happening out and about.
Well, they're taking into account what's currently happening.
Yeah, but it does. So if there's been a lot of stuff happening that we don't know about, therefore haven't taken into account, and something like another Orokonui is developed, that could be quite a substantial difference.
That could make a difference, correct?
Yeah. Okay. No, that's. I just want to, just in my mind those cause and effects. And thank you.
Yeah, and Orokonui has played a important role for reintroductions in the region, and also protecting species that are already there.
Can I ask one other question, which is slightly off-beat? I think we've got lots of time today. Orokonui is known very, very well as a bird sanctuary. It also has some, I think.
Also reptiles.
Yeah, and reptiles, absolutely. And we know about Zealandia and others. So are there other sanctuaries apart from, I mean, there's marine ones, I appreciate that as well. I'm wondering, are there other models that we probably haven't got in Otago for, take bats, for example. And we've got scenic reserves and wildlife reserves and scientific reserves. But do we have any sort of, are there other models of sanctuaries that we should be considering at some stage?
There was a nice review done by John Innes and colleagues in 2019, I believe, in a Royal Society paper on sanctuaries, and they defined different types of sanctuaries. So I think Orokonui was one of 8 ring-fence sanctuary greater than 25 hectares, but you can also have sanctuaries that could be across peninsulas, for instance.
Yeah.
You could have sanctuaries just by landscape scale predator control. You could have sanctuaries on islands, so there are different types of sanctuaries. It just depends on what your objectives are and what you're trying to achieve.
And I get that.
And that's a really nice paper. I can get it to you.
I am actually interested in saying, but it's more the species targeted type of sanctuary, rather than saying this is an island sanctuary, saying what is the best mechanism for saving, say, the bat. I mean, a scientific reserve may be the best thing we have in our armoury, but it may not be the best thing for the. That's our statutory answer. It's not necessarily the best thing we have for them and what it looks like. And I'm just wondering if there are targeted species type sanctuaries.
Yes, and we do have some of those in Otago. So
Okay.
for instance, we've got the Moko Moko Dryland Sanctuary, which was specifically around dryland environments and restoring populations of lizards, so mokomoko and
I mean, we've got the chafer beetle one I wrote.
correct.
I
And
know
there are the
management
invertebrates.
plan for
ones.
that many moons ago,
Yeah.
so I am aware of some of those, but I'm just wondering, yeah, I would hardly say it looks like the best protected site, having said that.
I missed that last bit, sorry.
I'd hardly say that the chafer beetle reserve looks the best preserved site, I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah. And it's also a naturally uncommon ecosystem that's critically endangered.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just gone slightly off piece, but I'm just interested in, because we're looking at this strategy and what the solutions are. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
The question from me is with your partners, in going forward, you've got other taxa and other work to do. There's no issue there with them being able to partner and in fact, even build on the strength already replicated in the work that's been done here.
That's the question, sorry.
Your partners with Doc University and others, is that there's no risk there with that level of partnership working?
It's it will depend on, I don't think there's risk. It's depends on the capacity of those partners and their expertise in those taxonomic groups. So for instance, with the bats, we had no collaborators from universities. It was mainly Doc and some consultants that provided their time free of charge or very cheaply. For the vascular plant, again, there was only the one person on Doc, but it was mainly people that had previously worked with them with that expertise or from CRIs. So it does depend on the species group. And like Tom will admit, I try very hard to get, and I always do, get the best people that can feed into this because it is an expert panel and we need the best expertise that we can get. And I'm confident in every taxonomic group of the people that obviously they're very strong. They've got the best knowledge probably of these species in the region. For the indigenous vascular plants, for instance, we had probably 120 years of experience. For the bats, with birds, we're probably going up to 80. And where we don't have knowledge, you'll see the long list of acknowledgement in the back. We do approach others. I should also mention, and it will probably interest you, we have approached Mana Whenua and through Akaha, and they've been very supportive of it. And there's been some interest of involvement for some of the other taxonomic groups that we'll hopefully be getting to in the near future.
Pleased to hear that. Look, I'm really encouraged by the work. Our sort of approach is collaboration is the only way to gather the information and mobilise and empower. I've been more involved with the national biodiversity strategy with the local, which is ultimately heading toward empowering communities, because to get these corridors, we've also got to engage with landowners and communities and what have you. But look, it's a really good foundational piece of work and impressive. So ngā mihi, yeah, we're stop.
Sure.
And all of those involved. Yeah.
Shall I move it or second it?
Yeah, so we'll note the report first. So is that being moved by?
Move both.
Noting the recommendation, yes, which is in your papers. So moved by Councillor Ware and seconded by Councillor Forbes. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of comments. And Richard and I were discussing some of this a bit earlier. I really love the work. Thank you. I like all this work that have been coming out of the science and these first reports that we're getting, and congratulations on doing that. And I'm thinking that, you know, this way forward, actually there's a whakatauki that's just dropped into my inbox right at the right moment, as these things do, and here it is. He ihu kuri, he tangata haere. Like a dog following his nose, man will find opportunity, and woman too, presumably. So, you know, and I think that this is what we've got to look at with these reports, and in this coming biosecurity and biodiversity strategy is about how we find that opportunity and how we use our funds to leverage stuff. So having all this information is fantastic, and we're going to have to learn, I think, as an institution, to really truly partner with other organisations to leverage, to make any difference here. Otherwise, we'll just while away money and ways that aren't good. And I have seen, as Brian was saying earlier, what small amounts of effort, if a lot of people take part in them, can do and can achieve. And I'd love to see in our plans that those sorts of things coming forward. But thank you very much for the report. It's wonderful. It's horrible in a lot of ways. I hate to see care on that list when they used to be so prolific up in the headwaters, and they're just not anymore. But it's great to know. We might as well know where we are. So it's good to know that. Thank you.
Sure. We'll put that motion then.
I was just gonna close it out with a few comments, if you don't mind. I was just gonna say, you know, this work will help empower the community with reliable information and help drive our biodiversity strategy and other work programs. But I think it's important to note how all of the habitats and locations around the region are valuable and important to maintaining our bird biodiversity, as we can see in this report. You know, if you look at the indexes of highly threatened birds or national strongholds that Otago hosts, we've got, you know, Kororo and Otago shags on the Otago Peninsula and coast on the east. We've got bitterns in the wetlands. We've got kariria across grasslands and farmland across the centre of the region. And we've got wrens and mohua in the mountains and headwaters to the west. And it's really cool to see the conservation work that community groups are doing. It's lucky enough to go out to the Southern Lakes the other week and see some of that mahi. Even translocations of tauka that haven't existed in the region for many years, and that'll change the picture that we're looking at here with these reports. But we've got a responsibility to know and inform the public, and this achieves that when it comes to avian reptiles, and we've seen it with our non-avian reptiles as well. And we also know that we do need to do more through things like the biodiversity strategy and helping community conservation efforts, and this work's a necessary step to drive that real action. So a big mihi to the team for this exemplary mahi. Kia ora.
Edward.
Councillor Moon.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just really want to say that from a regulatory perspective, we need to be informed because we've got that responsibility in the biodiversity or Indigenous biodiversity space. And we heard yesterday about the legislation that talks about maintaining Indigenous biodiversity and also, where necessary, enhancing it. So critical information, and as Scott's alluded to, factual evidence to justify investment going forward, whether it's, as the Chair's alluded to, in collaboration with partners, or whether we initiate investment that encourages people to come on board, or whatever we do. But my point is, yeah, critical information to inform our decision making going forward.
Good. Thank you. Just before we close off, I'll just check. Did I move or second the minutes?
Oh, yes, we have.
I just wonder.
I wasn't there.
Also, no actions for this committee.
I think put this paper just to round that out.
Yeah.
So just
Well, we'll put this paper and it's been moved and seconded. Put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. And I'll just have to withdraw my name from the minutes if I. Oh, I didn't.
They've been approved.
Oh, if they were. Yeah, I knew I moved or seconded
Yeah.
something, and I was just worried it was the minutes. I wasn't at the last meeting. So, thank you. Look, this has been a very good session and kia kahe roto tō mahi ngā rā whakamua. So,
I've got one, sorry, very short one. And I should have done this right at the start, sorry. Just given we are at the Science and Policy Committee. So Ben Mackey, who's sitting at the head of the table, who you'll be familiar with as a previous team leader of the science team, has been permanently appointed as the manager science, reporting through to Tom. So Ben's now working with Scott and our other talented team of scientists to develop that work program that the science team has been building and improving and working on over the last few years. So you'll see plenty of Ben moving forward in that manager science role. So just acknowledging that appointment to this committee.
Congratulations.
yeah, congratulations, Ben.
Well done, Scott.
I'll close the meeting as we open. Unu here, tūri tapanui, kia māma, kia wā, tēnā, kei tēnā. Me te wairu, e te ara takatū, hoi a rā e rongo, whakairia ake, kei roka, haumi e hui e whāti e karakauta.
Scott.
You think you can leave?